Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of News in Depth. Now, tensions on NATO's eastern flank have reached a new level following a recent wave of Russian drone strikes that breached Polish airspace. The incursion, which Polish authorities are still investigating, has reignited urgent discussions around Article 4, NATO solidarity, and the risk of escalation. With key statements from European leaders underscoring the stakes, the pressure on allies to respond decisively is mounting. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack this fast-moving development is Matthew Day, senior online editor at TVP World, seasoned journalist with deep insight into regional security dynamics as well as international affairs. Hello and welcome to News in Depth.
Thank you and good afternoon.
So we are looking at this drone situation that has rocked the kind of Polish airspace last night. We do have a statement made by the Polish foreign minister. Let's take a look and see if we can dissect that a little bit.
There is no doubt that this was not an accident. The relevant information came from the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Defence. The order was given to fire. Appropriate NATO procedures were triggered. Polish, Dutch, Italian and German forces were also involved in the operation. We extend our sincerest thanks to our allies. We are dealing with an unprecedented case of an attack, not only on the territory of Poland, but also on the territory of NATO and the European Union. Consequently, Poland has requested that Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty be invoked. This morning, our permanent representative to the alliance, Ambassador Jacek Najder, received my instructions on the matter. At noon, the charge d'affaires of the Embassy of the Russian Federation in Poland was summoned to receive an official note of protest.
So can you give us an idea of what the scope of this attack, what's the significance of it, and for, well, anyone abroad looking at this, how seriously should we be taking it?
Well, the very fact that you had at least 20 drones enter Polish airspace in the course of a few hours. If it had been one drone, two drones, people would say, well, that could be an accident. Right. But the fact that you had 20, that indicates that it was a deliberate act by the Russian Federation to either provoke Poland in some way or test Poland in some way or test Western resolve. Unfortunately, like the Kremlin has not sort of admitted to sending these drones, and it hasn't provided a little list saying the reason we did this is A, B, C, D.
Right.
So of course, the reason why this action was carried out, we don't know, and we can only really sort of guess or speculate. There are a number of theories going around at the moment that it was like it could just been like, as I said, a way to test, literally test Western air defences, see how good they are, how quickly they reacted, how efficient they are. Or it could be, or in addition to, it could be a way of just dialing up the fear factor in the West. If you dial up the fear factor, people get worried, pressure comes on, and that in a way can be turned into put pressure on Western unity. Maybe it's a bit like if you put pressure on an ice cube, it's a solid for a while, but if the pressure comes on and on and on, it shatters into lots of little pieces. Maybe that's an objective of what Putin is trying to do, to break up Western resolve by just really putting the pressure on Western unity.
Right, so there's, like you mentioned, still a few theories going on about what's the intention behind it. But again, like you mentioned, with 20 or at least 20 drones flying into the Polish airspace, this cannot be looked at as just merely an accident. Now, if it's point A, like you mentioned, how Russia is essentially trying to test the air defense system of NATO or the West, do you think that this kind of showcases the effectiveness or perhaps the lack thereof when it comes to NATO's air defense system when it comes to taking down these type of drones?
I think it can be interpreted in two ways. I think last night, yes, Polish Air Force, and I think with other NATO Air Force jets, they were very quick, they were very effective. But at the same time, I think 4 drones were shot down and 20 were fired. So, do the maths, a lot weren't shot down.
Right.
And so the other way of looking at it, this does expose certain problems within Western air defences, because NATO and the West, they do have significant gaps in air defences. This was demonstrated last night because you just have loads of drones. And loads of drones can overwhelm air defences, which is happening in Ukraine almost every night. And the West, when it comes to short range or very short range air defences, we have gaps. We have very good Patriot systems which can take out targets miles away. We have quite good medium range air defences, but on the short range factor, this is a big problem. I was reading a report only today about this, and it said that it is the Western countries, their inventories of short range and very short range air defences are very poor. And the problem is that it's going to take a long time to kind of expand that capacity. There are various models underway which could be produced quickly, but we're not. That's not going to happen now. It's not going to happen this year. We're talking about next year that maybe we could have an effective anti-drone defense system, because that's the problem. Drones, they're easy to produce and they can overwhelm the best of defenses, which unfortunately is happening in Ukraine every night.
Right. Well, if it were to be option number 2 to test a Western resolve, the timing seems quite interesting as well, with Washington putting pressure on Russia to come to a sort of peace agreement. Do you think that it's also kind of a deliberate choice to do this at this particular moment to, like you mentioned, try to fracture or fragment the West in its union?
It is a possible thought that may have gone through Putin's mind, said, hey, look, if we dial up the fear factor, Trump might go, oh my God, and he'll get on the phone to Zelensky and say, hey, once again, you're playing with World War III. Mm-hmm. Look what's happening in East Central Europe. It's time to do a deal right now. That could have been a calculation from Putin, that in a way that it puts the pressure on Trump, and he'll instead of putting the pressure on Putin, he'll put the pressure on Zelensky. Mm-hmm. Of course, it could backfire. I do believe that Trump is going to talk to Karol Nawrocki, the Polish president, later today. And Nawrocki might say, look, you've got to put the pressure on Putin. You've got to introduce these secondary sanctions. It is beyond the point of no return now. We have to act now. And that might be the message Nawrocki will communicate, hopefully in blunt language, to President Trump later today.
Right, and well, we do have a statement made by Ursula von der Leyen kind of in that same ballpark of thought as well. Let's take a look at her soundbite.
Putin's message is clear, and our response must be clear too. We need more pressure on Russia to come to the negotiation table. We need more sanctions. We are now working on the 19th package in coordination with partners. We're particularly looking at phasing out Russian fossil fuels faster. We're looking at the shadow fleet and at third countries.
Do you think this is an appropriate enough action, putting on another sanction, like Ursula von der Leyen said here, the 19th package? We've heard this kind of economic pressure that is supposed to kind of bring Russia to the negotiation table. But what we're seeing right now is unprecedented. Do you think purely economic pressure at this point is enough?
Well, if you talk to a Ukrainian, I think they'll be surprised that we're still talking about 19th package, and they're talking about cracking down on the shadow fleet, or kind of trying to make sure that Russian oil doesn't get into the EU. I think that should have been done last year or 2 years ago. It shouldn't have been happening right now. But there is work to be done. I think we need to close all the loopholes, close as many loopholes as possible. We can't accept the excuse that it's rather complicated to try and enforce secondary sanctions. Because what's the alternative? The alternative is that Russia is going to carry on provoking, is going to carry on pushing the boundaries, and at one point it might step over a mark. We go from Article 4, we go to Article 5, and then we could be in a war situation. So it is far easier and far more sensible to push these economic sanctions and make them harder and harder, like the missile that hit the government building in Kyiv the other day. The Ukrainians dissected it, and there's Western technology in that missile. No way that should be in that missile, that our technology is being used to bomb Ukraine. And the fact that it's there is a failure on our part. It's a failure on sanctions. So yeah, von der Leyen is right. We need to crack down on this, but of course it's a bit late in the game.
And you just mentioned Article 4 there. A lot of our viewers, and I've been personally getting some messages asking whether we are in an Article 5 situation. And can you help us clarify what state are we in when it comes to involvement of NATO? What does Article 4 entail? And what's the likelihood that this might actually even escalate?
Well, I don't think there's going to be any further escalation right now, unless something dramatic happens tonight. And that would be really dramatic. That would be like people dying in a NATO country through a deliberate attack. That, I think, that isn't going to happen. I think that would be, even Putin would probably shy away from that. So with Article 4, it's just like there's a discussion over a possible threat, and it has been evoked a number of times even in the last, say, 15 years, I think, when it comes to the situation in Turkey during the Syrian civil war. It was activated. Is that the right word?
Yes.
I'm not too sure. A number of times. So it's more of a discussion and a talking shop. It won't produce any hard, concrete results. I think it's more of a symbolic act rather than a productive act. And so Russia might pay attention. And of course, as I said, more of a symbolic act. It won't produce many concrete results, which will frustrate possibly the Polish government, and it will definitely frustrate the Ukrainian government, which has been calling for harder action since February 2022.
There's also a discussion about closing the border with Belarus in reaction to the Zapad exercises. Do you think that these are connected in any sort of way?
I would imagine they are connected. If we presume that the drone incident last night was planned, it was probably planned in some time in advance. I can't imagine they just said, "Okay, quick, let's do these missiles, send these drones tonight." But the closing of the Belarusian-Polish border by the Polish government, it indicates that we are in a very that the environment here, the atmosphere, is very tense, and every act now sort of people watch it, and they're going to see if it has a consequence, and if that consequence has another consequence. Are we on this sort of chain, which kind of leads to somewhere unpleasant, or are we just, or maybe we just sort of possibly we could be overreacting to various things.
So when it comes to Belarus, I've been looking at this map of how the drones have been hovering around Poland, and one of my questions would be, where are they exactly coming from? Because there is, one reason Ukraine war is so important is because of the geolocation and how Ukraine is a shield essentially for NATO's eastern flank. But today we've seen drones kind of cross that shield into Poland. How much of it has to do with the involvement of Belarus bordering Poland?
Belarus is, of course, one of Putin's major allies, and it has been used as a launching pad for the invasion of Ukraine and also for missiles and aircraft. And apparently these drones, according to the Polish Prime Minister, these drones did come from Belarus. Whether they were launched in Belarus, I'm not too sure, but apparently they came from Belarus. In the past, what has happened is that Russia has fired drones and missiles, and they kind of come through Belarus, they sort of loop round, come into Polish airspace, and basically attack Ukraine from the rear, and they sort of fox Ukrainian air defences. These ones appear to they were just fired in Poland's direction, and it looks like they were just fired and they were going to go in a straight direction and run out of fuel and drop from the sky. But Belarus is a very important player in this game, and the fact that you can just send drones and missiles straight across the border, they don't have to navigate through Ukrainian air defences, which are pretty good, and they just come straight into Poland. That is a worrying factor because Poland and Belarus are neighbours, so an attack on Poland won't take very much time.
Right. Now, we've seen a lot of international partners and as well as allies send words of support. But the Polish Prime Minister said that he's thankful for the support from coming around the world. However, a lot of times action needs to be taken as well. We have a statement by Donald Tusk. Let's take a look.
Poland is very grateful for these words of solidarity and support from all the allies. Yes, words of solidarity are needed at a time like this, but they're not enough. Today, it is necessary to speak loudly and clearly to the entire Western world and to all our allies. Article 4 is just a prelude to deeper cooperation for the security of our skies and our border, which is also NATO's border, and words are simply not enough here. We will definitely be looking for some more support during the consultations, both under Article 4 as well as between capitals. This is not our war, and this is not a war the Ukrainians are fighting alone. This is a confrontation that Russia is concluding against the entire free world, and this is something that everyone must finally understand, without exception.
Rosja wypowiedziała całemu wolnemu światu.
So when it comes to concrete actions from international allies, what do you think the Prime Minister is expecting?
Expecting more than solidarity. Like every time there is a meeting or anything happens, the first word you hear is solidarity. And I imagine some people get really tired of this word solidarity because it sounds good, but as the Prime Minister was just saying that, how often does it translate into something meaningful, something tangible, something that actually will deter the Russians from further provocative actions? And I think it's going to be difficult immediately for the West to do something more than just express a solidarity with Poland. I heard the British Prime Minister saying that they are considering sending more assets, air defence assets to Poland, perhaps. But you have to ask yourself, how many assets do we have to, me being British, have to spare? Can we send them to Poland? What use will they be? Are they the appropriate assets as well? That goes back to what I was saying earlier about we need defences against drones. The assets of the British may have may be fantastic against enemy aircraft, against ballistic missiles perhaps, but not so good against drones or large drone squadrons. And that could be true of all European and NATO countries. What would be good is that we start increasing the production and research into anti-drone air defences. These are like interceptor drones, or they could be kind of mini missiles, which are cheap and easy to fire, and they are effective against drones. But as I was saying earlier, we're behind on that at the moment. We need to increase production, we need to increase research, and then maybe we can offer something tangible for Poland.
Definitely a lot more concrete action needs to be taken, not just words of solidarity. Thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
And thank you for tuning into this edition of News in Depth. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.